Coming up, the New Jersey Devils jump in on the trade action, but did GM Fitzgerald help facilitate a move that will only further irritate the fan base? We break down why that'd be the wrong way to look at it coming up next. Yes, sir. It's DPL, the Devil's Puck Luck podcast, where I am one of your hosts, Adam Armbrecht, breaking down the New Jersey Devils update involved in a trade, the deadline looming March 8th. What is this team going to do? What is this organization going to do? Are they going to pursue a defenseman? Are they going to pursue a goaltender? How do they want to potentially improve this team or stand pat? Well, at least the first step in that process came here on a Wednesday night. We look over at Sean Shapiro on Twitter, who breaks down the full length of this trade. Trade number one, follow me if you can. The New Jersey Devils trade unsigned draft choice goaltender Cole Brady to the Calgary Flames in exchange for defenseman Chris Tanev. We've got him. Furthermore, the Calgary Flames have agreed to retain 50% of all future obligations for the contract in the 2023-2024 season. Trade number two. Don't get overexcited. The Devils then send Tanev to the Dallas Stars in exchange for Dallas's own fourth-round selection in 2026. Furthermore, the Devils have agreed to retain 50% of all future obligations in the contract for the 2023-2024 season. Least but not last, the Calgary Flames trade unsigned draft choice goaltender Cole Brady, remember him from the first step of this process, to the Dallas Stars in exchange for defenseman Artem Grusnikov, Dallas's own second-round selection in 2024, and a conditional third-round selection in 2026, Dallas's own as well, if Dallas advances to the Stanley Cup final in the 2024 playoffs, wins 3 rounds there, obviously. If Dallas does not win 3 rounds in 2024, then no additional pick is transferred from Dallas to Calgary. Okay, point, stop. We'll go ahead and utilize NJ.com as well to help expand on this a little bit. So the initial reaction here from the fan base, at least by what we're getting on social media, is what is going on here? Why weren't the Devils in the one-to-one trade transaction here to bring in a defenseman? Why are the Devils taking $1.1 million of contract on for a fourth-round pick in 2026? The reason being here, from all accounts, is that the Devils were not in on this for the defenseman from Calgary. And what I mean by that is if we use NJ.com's reporting as well here to supplement the conversation, first and foremost, obviously, there are several factors at play here for why the Devils got involved. We know that Dougie Hamilton sits on the long-term IR, and they have $8.3 million in cap space because of that. This terminology using it, weaponizing their space to net future assets to potentially use in deals ahead of that deadline. A league source told NJ Advanced Media on Wednesday, the Devils netting a fourth rounder is purely eating up space, which is a decent value, all things considered. On top of which, as I mentioned, they were not in the market to get involved with Tanev due to the fact that Dallas had strong interest in landing him and the fact that he would have been a rental move for a team already loaded with right-shot defensemen. Hamilton, currently on long-term IR, John Marino, Nemec as well. So, does this change anything in terms of the outlook for the New Jersey Devils? We'll get to that in a second. But the bottom line being that when you are in a position, as the Devils are right now, trying to fight to stay in that wild card picture, trying to give yourself an opportunity maybe to improve this team even marginally over the back end of this season, to at a worst case, say, what has gone right, what has gone wrong, what mistakes did we maybe make in the way that we constructed our roster, specifically in the defense and the defensive pairings that they put together, knowing that they were going to have young players like Luke Hughes playing prominent roles, If we made missteps there, how do we maybe acquire a talent that can help us understand better if we have a problem in personnel in terms of young players and what their long-term prospects are going to be? Or did we maybe mismanage still having Brendan Smith? Yes, you brought in Colin Miller, but are those guys, as we talked about the other day, Danny and myself, you talk about 7th defenseman on a roster. Well, is that good enough to help instill quality practices into your young defensemen around them? Is that enough just from a talent standpoint? A large part, answer's been no. in order to make sure that it helps you secure more victories than losses over the course of the season. As we stand here right now, the New Jersey Devils, coming off that win, have 64 points. 59 games are in the books there for them. And as we mentioned on our previous episode, the Lightning, who they lost to, they're 61 games through. They're on 69 points. So the Devils have 2 in hand there, trying to chase them down. And we know the Detroit Red Wings, 59 games as well, on 72 points. The Penguins are the big concern here. Still 3 games in hand on New Jersey and only 2 points back in the column, 64-62. And as we highlighted previously as well, a plus 16 in goal differential. Now, New Jersey certainly ate into their negative margin, now just a -7, and trying to put themselves in the group of what is a total of 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 teams, including Pittsburgh, that are in the plus inside of the Eastern Conference. Inside of the Metropolitan Division alone, there are 4 in total. Philadelphia plus 6, mentioned the 16 there for the Pittsburgh Penguins. So you still are in a position potentially to get yourself into that wild card spot. What does this 4th round pick turn into? It can turn into a mild facilitator in a deal. Maybe you can attach it to a player that you don't believe is going to be here long term, and it's just enough of the sweetener that is required to make another move down the line. As we continue using the NJ.com article as a roadmap here, does this mean the Devils are selling? Not at all. And once Danny gets a chance to get on here, as he's unavailable to join me, he'll say the same thing. This effectively doesn't mean anything as far as what the Devils are going to do or not do. It just means that when you have that money from the long-term IR stint for Dougie Hamilton, you can become a facilitator. In normal circumstances, if you said, why would you spend $1.1 million to get a 4th round pick? It's just a 4th round pick. Is that really going to mean anything? Maybe, maybe not. But this money doesn't carry over, doesn't affect anything. You can't take it with you. So use it now. If the Devils and Fitzgerald went and did this 3 more times over to get a 3rd round pick and another 4th round pick and another 4th round pick, it would be worth it. Again, because there's no other allocation to use that for. You could go use it potentially in making a move to bring in a player, sure, but it was only a fraction of what you had available to you out of that. So this doesn't preclude you from going and making a move and utilizing the majority, 80 to 90% of that long-term IR money to bring in a player to this team. So it doesn't affect anything that they're going to do here, essentially. And league sources indicated that nothing changes for the Devils after making this move, adding that they are open for business on deals of every level based on what the market dictates this week. So the one last note there from insiders around the league saying that they are open for business at every level. Does it mean that the Devils are officially sellers? Not necessarily, because this doesn't make them a seller in this moment either, right? All they did was pass through a player, take on some money, and get themselves a 4th round pick. So it doesn't change anything about their outlook about what they can do going forward here. I think that Danny and I have said in recent episodes that overall, and I think maybe Danny and I disagree a little bit in terms of would you go make the deal, though we've kind of batted these ideas around with one another. And I think generally settle in at the same spot. Well, if the right deal comes up, yes, I'll make it. So we talked about this bit on the pod and a ton of it off the podcast. If you tell me that a veteran rental is available that could help you understand and crystallize the moves you need to make in the offseason from a big picture standpoint, then go make that move. It cannot come at the cost of a young talent that you believe has a role in this roster or a young talent that you believe could facilitate a much more significant move in the offseason. We talk about the Alexander Holtz of the world here. If there's a goaltender that you want to go get to save the season, so be it. My impression is that while the Devils are not sellers right now, they are further from being buyers, not because of this move, but just in general. I think the hierarchy goes pretty much stand pat, see how Dawes can run along here for you, right? In between the pipes. And if that helps stabilize you, see if playing some soft teams here can reignite the offensive end of the ice as it did against the San Jose Sharks, and find out whether or not you can get yourself into a little bit of a rhythm here down the back end of the season and make a push for a wild card spot. Would that change, as we talked last episode about what the long-term prospects are for Lindy Ruff as the head coach and how they feel about him being in that role? Yet to be seen, right? Because while I have said, one loss does not dictate that someone needs to be fired, well, one win doesn't dictate that he needs to be given a lifetime extension either, right? Game by game, you continue to be informed about what this team is. Are they better than some of the worst in the league? Of course they are, because the talent is there. Does that mean that they're capable, though, of playing sound hockey against some of the mid and upper echelon teams down the stretch to get into the wild card, to put themselves into a position to win a playoff series? Now, last time Danny and I talked about, well, what would have to happen for Lindy Ruff to maintain his job? I believe Danny said winning 2 rounds in the playoffs. I don't know if that would be the requirement for me. But I do know that as they stand right now, it feels like they need to maybe add a little bit of something here, add a defensive minded defenseman to help stabilize what they have in those bottom six pairings, in those six pairings, excuse me, those 6 players, those 3 pairings. Get that cleared up. What happens next? We don't know. We have to wait and see. I would believe that they would stand pat and ride it out versus making a massive all in type of move for this year versus spending big assets to get a veteran at any position. And then I think as you move towards the deadline and as you watch how this team plays, you could see a margin sell for this team. And if we look at the Devils' schedule right now coming up, we know you get off of that San Jose win. It's obviously a nice one. You've won 2 out of your last 3, got beat up by the Lightning, really wanted that win, but you did take care of Montreal in the game prior. Now laying ahead of them over their next handful of games leading up to the deadline through March 7th. You're going to have 2 road games to finish out the West Coast trip before coming home. That's going to be the Ducks. It's going to be the Kings. Then you're going to come home for the Panthers and for the St. Louis Blues. So you have 4 games right now. And while you hate to put all of the weight of the season on it, it kind of does matter, especially when you think about the fact that there's a plus 52 difference for the Florida Panthers right now, leading the Atlantic with 39, 16, and 4 record, sitting on 82 points. Can you try to make a statement against a team like that? When you flip it over into the Western Conference and the opposition you're going to go against here, well, listen, 58 games in, the St. Louis Blues are a 62 win team as well. They are a minus 13 on the plus minus as well in the point differential category. So they are a team that is beatable. They are a team that you should feel like you can go get a win against. You add that in with the other 2 games, the Ducks being a very winnable 43-point team, minus 55 on the point differential. Obviously, you want to feel like you're capable of going and getting that game. So that's what we're talking about here. Can you go and over these next 4 games, win 3 of them? I think that that's probably the standard, and win them in a way that as you approach the deadline, Fitzgerald says, okay, we are close enough. It's not about whether he believes in some of the individual players, the core pieces of this team in the long term. It's about whether or not he believes in them in the short term. Can this team this year make that push? If so, I'll spend a little bit to get us something that we probably need. I don't know if it rises to the level of a goaltender. Maybe we'll see, because that's still a long-term issue. And you can try to get a player that you believe will be here over multiple seasons. But if you can convince the organization that it's worth that little something extra, then they'll try to solidify that. They'll try to make it possible to get that wild card spot, get into the dance, and then see if your team can start clicking like it did a season ago, taking down the Rangers, right? So I think that's where we stand right now. Reiterating at the top, as we mentioned, the Devils become a facilitator. They use some of the long-term IR money. They eat some of the cash. Tanev ends up with the Dallas Stars, and the New Jersey Devils end up with a 4th-round draft pick. That's it. That's all. There's nothing really else to see here yet at this point. What ends up happening here ultimately, by the way, one thing that you need to realize from a trade standpoint, it starts to stack up, right? One move by itself could indicate something. Then the next move starts to create more of a picture. And by the time we obviously get to that deadline and get through the deadline, then we'll look back at the steps that led up to it and have a clear picture about what was being attempted by the New Jersey Devils. We'll also hear if there were conversations about trades they couldn't execute, if there were price points that they were unwilling to commit to. So this is certainly a positive, at least for me, that Fitzgerald is active heading towards the deadline. Whether or not you agree ultimately with the decisions and the moves that get made, you want a GM who's willing to go to the table, willing to have his ears open and understand, hey, this was something that could have been taken care of without the Devils being involved. Instead, they get a little bit of value out of it, and it costs them effectively nothing. We'll be back in, obviously, as I mentioned, the New Jersey Devils will be working through their schedule here coming up. It is Wednesday at the time of this recording. Had to go ahead and check myself there. And they will be heading, obviously, to finish off their West Coast swing. The Kings will come up there after they take on the Ducks. So get the Ducks win, put that in the bag, get yourself 3 out of your last 4, right? Start to feel like you have a little bit of rhythm here. See how you go and fare against the Kings, and then get back home for a massive uphill battle against the incredibly strong Florida Panthers, followed up by a very winnable game against the St. Louis Blues. We could turn around here, just to reiterate, from February 24th against Montreal, gets the win, lose to Tampa Bay, beat San Jose. Even if you split these next 4 games effectively, you'd like to win 3. But if you split these next 4 or lose 1 in overtime, if you can come out here and look back and say that over those 7 games leading up to the deadline, you got yourself 4 wins, maybe a 4-2-1 record, I think you would love that. And I also think that inside of the margins of the wild card chase, you could feel pretty good about it. Remember, they lost back on February 15th to the Kings in a 2-1 low-scoring battle there as well. So you have to think about where they've been, what they can learn from that previous matchup, and how they can carry it over for themselves heading into that next meeting, because the Kings, who I failed to mention earlier, are a team currently sitting 4th in the Pacific, 68 points through here. They are a plus 18 on the point differential. They are very much in those discussions. But as we know, we look over at that Western Conference, there is a lot of congestion from the Central, especially. You have Winnipeg, Dallas, who now wants that commitment of trying to get deep into the playoffs. 77 points are the Colorado Avalanche, followed by the Predators at 68. So those top 3 teams, though, within 2 points of one another. Obviously, Vancouver has a nice cushion in the Pacific on 83 points themselves. That's the deal. New Jersey gets involved, they get themselves a draft pick, and we will see what happens next for them. And if you want to know what happens next and you want to hear the breakdowns, get over to YouTube for Devil's Puck Luck. Turn on the alerts so you know when we're going live and giving you our updates. Get us on your podcast feed. Get us over on Twitter, especially at NJDevilsPL, where Danny does a tremendous amount of work updating, being in the conversations, trying to contextualize what New Jersey is doing heading towards that deadline. Follow at Danny the Face. Follow me at Adam Armbrecht. And until next time, if Danny were here, he'd have the quick quip. I've put that on his plate. But let's go ahead and take that deep breath and see what Fitz has in his bag. We'll catch you next time.